Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theatre,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theatre,
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theatre. MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Good evening, and welcome to MOTSterpiece Theater. Tonight we bring for you the 1959 classic, Some Like It Hot. Let's go around and introduce ourselves.
I'm Steve.
Ian?
I, as always, am Scott. Some like it, Scott.
And I will be your host for this evening, Leah. Scott, would you like to give the synopsis?
Sure. Laurel and Hardy do drag in Florida.
Yes. Or, as I would say, some like it not.
Yes.
Terrible.
There's an alternate title they had for this film.
Alright, let's jump into it, and I'm going to throw it to Steve for the intro.
Okay, so the film starts out, Jack Lemmon and the other guy are in a band in Chicago.
In a rock and jazz band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a speakeasy.
Run by gangsters.
Run by gangsters, obviously. Who else runs speakeasies? I don't know. Anyway, they're playing their sax and stand-up bass, and joint gets busted. They leave, go try to find some more work somewhere else because they're broke. They go to borrow some woman's car who...
one of the secretaries from their movie agencies.
Exactly, who is, who they're involved with. And they stumble upon the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Which is
one
of the highlights of this movie.
So a bunch of mobsters start chasing them down. And that's pretty much the introduction. I think it started off pretty well. Grabbed my interest from the beginning.
To the point, though, you forgot the opening chase scene.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Which is in a hearse with a casket full of booze against some cops. And, like, the cops are, like, there's, like, 10 police officers in this car. Oh, no, there's, like, 5 of them in this car. And the car spins out of control, and they all miraculously hang on to this car as it's, like, careening down this road.
Cops have very strong hands. Everybody knows that.
Yeah,
these magic bulletproof cars. I mean, all these bullets and no one gets hurt.
No, the police got hurt, of course, but everyone else is fine.
Well, that's the real tragedy.
Yes, of course. But no, yeah, I mean, that, I think, was a good introduction. And I agree, though, it cuts off, I would say the plot really kicks off when they escape the St. Valentine's Day Massacre and have to flee the city. But no, the opening, like, chasing itself, I think is pretty good. Like, it's cops and robbers, and I thought that was a nice setup.
Yeah, I agree.
At least. It was an arresting introduction, at least for the first scene.
And the speakeasies in a funeral parlor called Mozzarella's funeral home.
Yeah.
Run by Mr. Mozzarella.
Yeah. And like the organ has a button that opens a wall so you can get to the speakeasy. So it's this weird mixture of like a mildly serious gangster movie with odd absurdist elements.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what's so great because it, again, as any good intro should do, it sets up and it gives reason for everything that's going to happen. So it kind of tells you in the name of the funeral parlor that we're going to play with words and we're going to kind of play with what's going on. And the reason that the men eventually have to go and dress into drag is because they're escaping. And the dual layers of the story and like how they're going to play on gender, how they're going to give a second meaning to everything starts right there.
Or it's just a mildly racist pun against Italians. So
Maybe.
Or
both.
See, again, you can see depth there, or you can see them kind of lazy, comedic...
cheap joke.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that to some extent, but the fact that it continues throughout the film and that the double entendres are always present, I think it's,
Fair enough.
All right, well then, shall we vote?
Sure. I'm going to give it a 1 for intro.
Yeah, I will give it a 1 as well.
Me too.
I thought it was interesting enough.
Yeah, I think it was a good intro at least.
I will agree with you, gentlemen. It was a good, solid intro. Ian, would you like to take us into the body of the film? Shake it down a little bit.
Well, speaking of shaking down, so the two main protagonists have to flee Chicago because they're wanted by the mob. And they end up dressing in drag and joining an all-female kind of band that's going down to Florida. And Marilyn Monroe is the lead singer of this band. And hijinks ensue.
Yep, pretty much. I want a hearty hijinks, like I said.
Like, there's a lot of, like, them playing off between being guys,
or, I don't know,
like, trying to be women.
Laura and Harriet, since they're in drag now.
And they end up in, they end up in Florida. There's a lot of millionaires around who, I guess this is ostensibly what the band is there for, to play to this wealthy crowd. And there's this really weird thing where, like, though not Jack Lemmon is trying to seduce Marilyn Monroe by both being her confidant as a woman and lying to her by
presenting the dream.
Her dream, a millionaire with a yacht. In an absurd, like, the thing is, it's two dumb people who both want to pretend that their lives could be better than they are, lying to themselves and to each other.
Yes,
in
that's
order
very well
to,
said.
And it totally didn't work for me. The comedy in this movie didn't. I started to really despise all the characters, and I guess Jack Lemmon ends up having a millionaire fall in love with him as a woman. And he's pursuing her throughout the film, and eventually they use him to escape, but that's going to the conclusion. But, like, I don't know, it's throughout the entire thing, like, it comes off as very progressive and very sexist at the same time.
Yes, that's true. I think we'll speak to that when we get to themes, but I think that is very valid.
So, I think that's, like, yeah, like, there's really no, like, kind of, like, good narrative plot here. It's kind of people bumbling around and in a terrible romantic comedy.
Yes, well, the only good body in this movie is Marilyn Monroe's, of course.
Yes.
Everything else it's basically, first of all, and to be more serious, it's too fucking long. I would like it's like almost like two movies in a sense, like, and yet they're like, I guess they're cut up pretty well, but there's a lot of padding within them as well. So that just got me, like, I was like, is this movie over yet? Like, you know, they could have cut out a whole bunch of shit, like trying to have two, like, complex-ish plots, if not the most complex ever, but yeah, in like a comedy of errors love story, but then also a gangster, like, being hunted by mobsters story, which came back at the end. Like, it sort of got dropped from the plot, and you even said, like, the mobsters coming back, they should, narratively, they have to, I would think.
The Chekhov's mobsters.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I agree with most of what you said. It just, I think it didn't hold together for the duration of the main story itself.
I agree with both of your points. There's some sexism, some racism, some maybe uncertain terms. I see it in a different light, but again, we'll touch that when we go to themes. I like the story of it. I think it progresses nicely, but again, it's just too long. It just...
I also want to make a caveat quickly that I attempted going into, and as I do with older movies, try to watch it through the context of when it came out.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But since this movie didn't work for me, and since the protagonist, wasn't rooting for either of them, I was just so removed from watching this movie that I couldn't help but view it through modern day terms.
Yeah, I get it. Yep.
Well, yeah.
I saw this movie a while ago, and I remember it fondly, but yeah, it was very drawn out, especially in points where it didn't need to be. Like, it seemed like there were like 10-minute scenes where there didn't need to be 10-minute scenes.
Exactly.
You know? They could have been like 3-4 minutes long.
Right, like the back and forth when the one couple is doing the tango and the other couple is on the boat, and it just goes back and forth. That could have been 2 minutes.
You only needed one cut between those.
It's
not
so
like
long,
3 or
and
4.
all they're doing is one is dancing and the other is.
I get it. I
Yeah.
understand what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Maybe the best way to describe this is that this movie lost its charm for me quickly,
Yeah,
and it never regained it.
I agree with that.
I don't feel that way. I thought that it still had a lot of charm throughout the film for me, and
It spread thinner and
the
thinner.
first time I saw it, I loved the movie. This time, I was not as impressed with it, but I still liked it. I still enjoyed watching it.
Well, then Ian, cast away.
I'm giving it a very strong 0.
I'm giving it a solid 0 as well.
I'm a little torn. It is long, which makes me want to give it 0. There are reasons for the length of it that I think is impacted by the time and when it came out. You know, I'll go with a 0 because what I loved about it really speaks to the themes of the movie, and it's fair enough to vote for there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There are parts of the body that I enjoyed thoroughly, but overall, it was just kind of drawn out unnecessarily, I think.
So 0.
So 0.
And that brings us to the conclusion, Scott.
Well, I'm gonna probably not have very good things to say about it. It was sort of like a classic, like, oh, lol, like, joke at the end. After, like, a somewhat serious, like, series of events happened, people got murdered, and, like, they were still, like, sort of escaping. And even when the very last thing that happens is Jack Lemmon reveals himself to be an actual, like, a man to the old the creepy old millionaire who was wooing him the whole time as a woman. And he's like, well, nobody's perfect, ha ha ha, like the end, like, and it really like grated on me.
But I think that the real conclusion starts when the gangsters from Chicago end up in
when they show up in Florida. Maybe that's the beginning of the third act. Yes.
Now I wasn't really have much of an issue with them showing up in the reasons that it was kind of a conference for gangsters.
It was a mob meeting.
It was like, again, like if it wanted to be more cliche, they would have tracked them down or something like that. But I bought the coincidence. The issue I have with this aspect is that they added this entire subplot at this like point of a feud between gangsters and like little Bonaparte, who is the head mobster, is trying to kill the Chicago mobster, and so he has a surprise cake with him like a machine gun in it and kills. So it seems completely arbitrary and unnecessary.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Like I didn't mind it, but I thought it was interesting, but completely out of nowhere at the same time. So it was, it was entertaining to watch, but also like they're slapping it in there at the end. Agreed.
Yeah. It was tension enough that the gangsters showed up and then they recognized them. That's fine, but they got into this conflict because they accidentally witnessed a murder or gangland slaying. So they end up under the table at another gangland slaying and are now being chased by an entire different group of mobsters. It's just mind-boggling the thought process that went into this plot twist.
Sure, like I agree, and then maybe this is like we glossed over it. Should have said this in the body, but it's almost like so they're having like serious like tense-ridden scenes, except then like a fucking Benny Hill chase scene breaks out like in the wake of it. So it keeps flip-flopping back and forth between those two tones, like and jarringly fast too, like one and the same. So it tried to be serious on one hand and farcical on the other, and it tries to cut up the difference between those two, and doesn't really live up to either.
I don't know if it was really trying to be completely serious though. Like there were scenes that it was like, they were dealing with serious stuff.
That's what I mean. But like
it was at its heart always a comedy.
I suppose, but but even so when they tried to go like a little bit more serious than what was happening beforehand, even if it wasn't completely like in depth, nevertheless they had to like when we talk about themes, I think we'll cover a lot of this. But when they tried to address serious issues, it was surrounded by farcical comedy. So they taken together, putting those back to back makes it less effective for both for me.
But if I think about what the time that's coming out, what
sure,
it means,
and like as you said,
you kind of have to hide these serious things underneath comedy, so people don't always.
That's fair enough. That's true. Just narratively, it just didn't hold together. And you're right. I'm totally like I'm viewing it, perhaps not as objectively as possible, even given the time. But that's just the way it's going to be.
But even if you're viewing it through that, you have here a very cliched, and I've seen similar movies with these gangsters in it. This is a framework that they're building up. There's nothing, in a sense, there's no parody there of gangster films.
That's
it's played
just
straight.
Gangster tropes. Yeah.
So it's just cliched, but it's the wrong frame for this movie, and it's bookended without really ever for an hour or so, never even bringing this up again, and then all of a sudden this somewhat serious cliched mob story drops off the map and then comes back. Yeah. And I don't know what they were trying to do with it.
Yeah.
I agree with all that.
I would definitely agree with that. I think the last few seconds we're in the boat and all the truth is coming out. That I really liked, but that's not enough to overcast just how ridiculous and how unnecessary the whole chase scene and the mob thing was. Well, they could have cut out the whole conference, and the fact, oh my god, they're under the table. I'm just like, how do you hide under this narrow little table, two people in the same exact space, and nobody realizes that you're there?
Well, but
that's the Benny Hill.
Oh, that just bothered me.
Type of humor, like this slapstick.
But there's slapstick and there's just complete denial of reality.
We were talking about the padded length of this film, and this is very much like why it feels like you could have had an effective with just the main antagonists who were set up coming back, having chase scenes with them. That would have been very effective if nothing spectacular. But they added what 10, 15, 20 minutes to the entire plotline.
Sure.
I mean, the fact that they sang the entirety of "He's a Jolly Good Fellow" and you heard it's just unnecessary.
And they even said, "Make sure you pop out of the cake and murder him at the second chorus." So great, so I have to sit through it. But no, I mean, actually, I liked I didn't mind, as I said, the mafia stuff like at the end as much as the actual ending on the boat, the conversation when they're getting away in the boat. I like that even less. But I totally agree that it also was like slapdashed in there and thus padded out the movie for reasons that, narratively probably could have been dropped. So all that to say, I'm going to give it a 0.
I'm gonna give with a 0.
I'm giving it a 0 as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to give it a 0 as well. There's nothing really...
Can you rebut any of the points
Substantial.
we had said?
Which brings us to themes, and I will start this off. I really, really love the themes of this film. Just the fact that everybody kind of plays their own alter ego, or you have an alter ego for everybody, and that alter ego is the male-female version of yourself. And so many of the things that the men do not enjoy while they are female, the attention that they're getting, the touching, the slapping of the butt, they're things that even after they've experienced being a female, and especially before, you see the two guys walking into the music office and he's seducing this female to basically get her car from him. There are things that as the females they do not like, but as the men they constantly do and they constantly engage in, and how much they don't see the irony or see their other selves and their...
To challenge that point, though, while I agree it touched upon those themes, my big problem is I feel that the protagonist didn't learn any of them. They're still going through, they're still using kind of relationships to get what they want. He's lying to Marilyn Monroe to get in her pants, and then even when he confesses, like, she's not outraged that she's been lied to. She's like, oh, at your heart, you're acting just like him. Like,
It's like the scams I've always loved. Like, it sort of negates itself. Like, I agree that that's a great theme that, you're faced with gender reverse roles, so you're experiencing like life through the eyes of the other gender that makes you realize things. I think he comes close to having, like, when he's on the phone with her, what is his name, Jerry, the guy who's trying to seduce Marilyn Monroe, and he's trying,
Josephine or Joe.
he has to escape, and he's saying goodbye to her. And he gives her the bracelet that they also swindled out of the other guy. And she says, oh, are you always just generous? He says, not always. Like, I thought, like, that was sort of, like, close to self-realization or realizing that he's sort of a dirtbag when he's a man.
And I don't think that the characters necessarily need to learn from it or grow from it. I think that the audience needs to see that, too.
Man,
and,
if you're just making social commentary, then perhaps. Like, I see that point, too.
And I feel like that's what not a lot, but that's the beauty of comedy, is, again, you can have these social commentaries and you hide it underneath all the slapstick and all the hilarity, and you kind of don't recognize it right away that this is what's going on, and it's a great meme to get that message out, especially in 1959, where, like, Kansas banned this film because of how provocative it was, the entire state.
But when it comes to social commentary, I feel that this is closer to Big Mama's House than it is to, like, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
But Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is still so inherently racist at points that, like, the people don't get the message either. Like, the family doesn't learn from anything. Well, that's it. We can have that film and do it.
I was gonna say, like, I agree that the themes is probably the best part of this movie. Like, I respect the intent they tried to address, and I think they did it as best they could. Again, yes, given the time it was made in, society and the culture that was going to be presented to. So whether or not they were able to go as deeply, at least they highlighted it a bit and showed some aspects about it. And
that's fair.
Yeah, I thought it was I thought it was pretty well done throughout the film too. I agree with you, Leah, that I think that the characters don't need to learn, like, quote unquote, learn their lesson for it to be an effective vehicle for whatever theme they're putting forward.
And maybe even more poignant if they don't, that even having this experience, you still don't learn it.
Fall back into your roles,
Which is another commentary on, like, society or, like, how you're programmed within your role in society, and how fast you can fall into whatever role it is that you're playing at the time.
Sure.
Yeah, very much so. So I will have to go with a very hard one on this.
I'm gonna give it a 1.
I was initially going to give it a 0, but you guys kind of convinced me that through context, and I tried to watch this movie through the context of it, I respect their intent if I don't particularly agree with the delivery. So it's going to be a soft 1, but it'll be a 1.
Yes, it's a 1 for me. Like I said, like they did the best they could with what they had at the time. And it's a noble effort, so that's all.
And that will bring us to characters, and we'll start off with antagonists, and we'll go to Siva.
All right. Well, originally it's what's the guy's name in the? Does anybody remember?
It's Joe
Spats.
It's Spats.
Yeah, for the
the mobster.
Yeah. So it's that guy originally in Chicago, and he's the one that kills everybody, or has them killed in the on Valentine's Day in the garage. And then it kind of, as we were mentioning, does this whole like weird switch off to little Bonaparte or little Napoleon or whatever the hell his name was.
Little Bonaparte.
Little Bonaparte. And I thought that both of them were fine as antagonists. Yeah, it probably wasn't necessary to switch at the end there. But I actually liked Spats better originally. But, I mean, I don't have much more to say about it.
Well, I have sexism as an antagonist,
Yeah.
and also gangsters. So those are your two ones in this movie. So you just covered gangsters, but like, I don't mean to be as facetious as it comes off, but I think that's it goes back to the theme.
Yes.
Because the protagonists do encounter it, but do they learn from it? Maybe not all that much.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, present it as the audience, and mobsters are always going to be mobsters. So that they're just there as they're the default villain, especially for 1959.
But neither of them, to me, were effective.
Fair enough.
In their presentation.
The gangsters were cliche, but nevertheless that's who they were. They served the role as gangsters, like that's just what they're going to do. I don't know what else to say about that. I think it was decent enough, and again, the commentary of like cultural bias. It's also your ingrained roles in society.
I would very much agree with that. And I would say, for me, the gangsters are more supporting because they kind of just give you the story a place to go and a reason for it going. For me, the antagonists and the protagonists are all kind of wrapped up into the themes, and going back to it, it's like they play their own antagonists. They show to the world their worst sense of themselves and that they're keeping swindling and they keep doing it. But when they put on different clothes and when they take on a different personality, they play that other alter ego and they play the best version of themselves. Or maybe not the best version, but they play a version...
They play the swindling versions of the opposite sex.
Kind of, yeah. Well, I don't think the females... I don't think when they're acting as women, they're swindling. They're, the girls throw the party and they actually don't want that party and they're trying to stop it. And... I think that Daphne actually does kind of develop some sort of kindness towards the millionaire. But
at that point, if you're like looking at women, they have nothing really positive to say about women. They're careless.
I completely disagree. Oh my God,
they're all they want is a rich husband that they'll go back to the swindling jerks that they like. I don't know. I don't like their portrayal of any of the sexes in here. I think it shows the worst of everybody.
Maybe that's the point.
Yeah, and I feel like that's Marilyn Monroe's character. I love that, again, looking at 1959, you have women who are kind of scandalous dressed, but throwing a party, and it's a time that's supposed to be Prohibition.
Sure. Well,
they don't really...
I was also going to say, another antagonist is Prohibition itself. But anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of social commentary they can see as the characters themselves, yeah. But I don't know, they're like willingly drinking and they're smoking and they're being this, but it's only a place you can be when you're around women and you can really be yourself, but they let go.
Well, that's not true because they show women in the speakeasy earlier having a good time and smoking and drinking, and so saying that, I don't think that metaphor 100% works.
Maybe not, but even then, you have more women who are, again, smoking and drinking and being I think that's a great image to put onto women.
I think so. I'm not a woman, so I can't commentate on it. But, I mean, I just think, the commentary on sexism in society is still a good one. Yeah. Effective, at least, if nothing else is.
But I don't believe it was effective, so back in the argument of themes. So I don't think there's no clear message to this.
Well,
so.
In that case, we're going to keep going in circles, so let's vote it up.
Just based off of what you guys have gone back and forth about, I think I'm actually going to give this a 1.
Again?
I'm going to give it a 0.
I'm giving it a 1.
I'm going a 1. And Ian, we'll throw it to you for the protagonist.
I absolutely despise both of these protagonists. And this was one of my main issues with the movie, that if you start disliking the people you're following, you're not going to become invested in this movie. And for 2 different reasons, they were terrible people. And I was actively rooting for them to get shot at the end of the thing. I didn't want to see them succeed. I was actually hoping that Marilyn Monroe and the creepy millionaire would get together.
I was also suspecting that kind of...
And these two were left together because that's the people they deserve to be. They deserve to feed off of the vileness that fuels their lives.
Wow, you really hated these characters.
I think that would have been a better ending. I agree with that. I did not like them either. They were somewhat charming to start off with, but then that went away very, very quickly and never came back.
I feel like you get the perspective of how they you're initially seduced by their charm,
Yeah.
and then you realize that they're awful
just
people.
Dickwads, yeah, agreed. And and because going back to what you said, this movie would drag on too long, so you spent way too much time with them. Whether or not they were acting as their alter ego, feminine selves, or just the swindler, hustlers that they were. Anyways, but I definitely agree with Eve for the most part. They're not great protagonists. In fact, we're annoying at times.
Leah, may I ask you a question as a woman? Okay. So, would you fall for a guy who, dressed as a woman to gain your confidence, lied to you, then dressed as the man of your dreams,
yeah.
and then told you that both of those were lies, and would you fall in love with him anyway?
How big is this penis? No, I mean, no.
Fair enough.
They didn't address that in the film. That would have never happened. He is a saxophone player, so maybe that's another double entendre.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I mean, he's got an up and.
so,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
He can
Anyway.
work his tongue, and he's got a nice... I mean, fall in love, though, no. But again, they also make her... I guess this goes back to your point, Ian. In some ways, they didn't like her character, because she's very... She even admits it. She's like, I'm stupid.
Yeah,
I
and I that was grating, too. She's like, I'm not the brightest or whatever. Like, I'm dullard or whatever she said. Like, yeah.
And it's kind of weird because it almost sounds like she left some sort of wealthy life. Like, she had a coming out ball and she was a debutante. To be in this band to only chase the life and the money that she left behind.
Well, I think those were... I was confused about that because I thought she was lying about that in order to impress
Yes,
the guy.
I believe that is true. Because earlier she said her father was just like a train conductor.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Or she just...
Well, she's lying herself anyways, but no, I think they're both lying to each other because they're presenting a side of of themselves to the other that they want to be looked at in a good light, and when they really are not that thing at all.
Very true. That's probably more likely what's going on here.
Well, that's what I got out of it anyways.
Right. I mean, I as far as the protagonists went, I never really minded them. I don't know. I guess they were a lot more grating to you guys than they were to me.
A lot.
I didn't think they were anything special, but they were fine in as far as it went for me. So, I mean, I don't have much more to add. They were pretty vanilla. And honestly, I'll probably still give this a 0 just because they weren't amazing, but I didn't think they were bad.
Well, if they had to carry the film and they didn't do anything for you, then that has to be, I feel, a kind of negative outlook on them.
I suppose. I thought that the film was kind of carried by the humor more so than their than them as characters.
Well, that was attempted humor. Admittedly, I laughed at a couple of things, but they're all again, it's a product of the times. Like they're dated gags and so forth. So yeah, and also the LCDist of all jokes for the most part.
I think that's
Let's go
unfair.
to dialogue and let's save the characters.
Okay, fair enough.
So, anyone want to add, or shall we vote?
I think it's pretty clear what Ian and I are giving this.
I've drawn a frowny face 0.
All right.
As much as I want to continue to give this a 1 because of the themes and the antagonists, Marilyn Monroe just bothers me throughout this entire movie.
Especially as a woman, I would think.
Stand
Will you consider her a protagonist?
Kind of, yeah. I feel like because in my mind, the antagonist is those that have the double sense of self to them.
Well, she has a double sense of self, then.
Well, I more mean that the guys dress up and they put on the characters and they kind of have to show this other version of themselves. I think she, across the board, doesn't do that, and in not doing that, she doesn't have the antagonist self show unless you have a point where she shows the.
She likes to drink and she has to hide the drinking. That's how we're introduced to her character. And when she meets the millionaire, who is the protagonist, who's dressing like a woman, is now dressing like a millionaire, she's lying about herself in order to appeal to him. So I feel that throughout she has that deceit to her.
Oh, yeah, I see that. But I don't think that plays a foil or like an alter ego of the self. I think that's just like she's a horrible, lying, deceitful person.
But that's how I felt about all the protagonists.
Wow.
So,
well, then that answers the question. So she's a protagonist. And I will give her a 0. And that leads us to supporting... Oh, did you not vote? I'm so sorry.
No, I said it's obvious that I'm giving it a 0.
Okay. And Steve?
I gave it a 0 as well.
And that leads us to supporting with Scott.
All right, so I'm in a grand tradition. I didn't like them all for the most part, but however, Mr. Beanstalk is going to get probably a 1 for me just for that name alone, perhaps. And he played like the scrolly manager of the little band. He wasn't in it much. He didn't do much. I know, but I liked him regardless of it. Like it was just something. He was the most charming part of this film to me.
Sweet Sue, who is the
conductor, the female
no
conductor.
one named Sweet in the movie is like ever a good person. She's the prudish like band conductor.
She's like the dorm matron essentially.
They set them up almost to be the secondary antagonists, and then they drop off the face of the earth.
I know, agreed. I'm just saying, like he got me enough that every time they said Beanstalk, get out here, like I was like, all right, cool, I like this guy. And listen, he's an integral part too because without his glasses, then the millionaire disguise would have fallen apart. Glasses were an integral part of Marilyn Monroe's secret, attractions, like what turns her on. So, anyways, I'm taking this question less seriously, but still, and all the girls actually I think were okay. They served their role. Were they the most well characterized ever? No. But they didn't need to be, and they were fine for what it was. They served their role within the plot itself fine. So I think I'm gonna, and this one I'll give it a better score than perhaps I would have.
Well, when you deal with the gangsters as secondary characters,
what other antagonists?
I think that Spatz is the main antagonist of this. Although he dies like before the finale, so I don't know.
And also Griswold, or the old millionaire guy who's wooing. I don't know. Quote, Daphne.
But there's so many cliches in this, and even at that time, they were cliches.
Yeah, but I think they did them well.
I was thinking that the guy reminded me of the Cowardly Lion throughout the. But I liked that little Bonaparte had a hearing aid, and that was like a neat little characterization there. But overall, like a supporting cast will several weeks from now, I remember anything about the supporting cast.
I'm going to call you Beanstalk several weeks from now, and then you'll remember.
But do you necessarily have to remember them? I think the supporting cast is just there to kind of push the story around. But they're not like the protagonist and the antagonist. They necessarily have to stand out in your mind. They just have to keep the story going and keep the characters in the right direction and kind of play off them when necessary. I think that was achieved. I think the gangsters made the story happen, and the men that are like wooing the women kind of keep it going. And
I think the supporting cast did what a supporting cast should do in this film. I think they kept everything going pretty well, and I like Beanstalk and the millionaire, whatever his name was pretty good.
Fielding or something?
Fielding. Yeah, I didn't see any problem with them.
Yeah, like I said, it all held together pretty well, and I even liked him.
All right, so
I'm giving it a 1.
I'm going 1.
I'm going to give it a 1 as well.
And Ian?
I'm going to give it a soft 1, but a 1 nonetheless.
Fair enough.
Wonderful. And that will bring us to dialogue, and I will start this. I like the dialogue. I laughed. I enjoyed the movie. It definitely made me smile at times. Just some really great lines. I mean, you can tell there's this great thing about the dialogue in this movie, just for a little bit of trivia. There are parts where Marilyn Monroe, she either didn't want to learn her lines or she was unable to or couldn't.
Sure.
And they had parts where they had just chalkboards in the background with the lines written on them, or they would put them in, at one point she's like opening up drawers and they had her lines in the drawers because she just couldn't remember it. So even for just something little like that, the trivia behind it, and I laughed.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of one-liners in this film that I liked. I thought it did a good job of, keeping everything pretty much in the way, except for, as you were saying, Scott, when it gets when they're trying to be more serious than the film is as a whole. But the dialogue kept the movie going, and I thought was pretty good between all the characters.
I found some of it cringeworthy, and I actually had to get up and leave the room at this certain part because it was bothering me. I was surfing the internet on my phone about at the last half hour or
20
so.
minutes, 25 minutes or so, yeah.
There's one scene that I actually thought was kind of interesting when he is first playing the millionaire and he's basically building the lie off of what's around him. So he finds Marilyn Monroe finds a bunch of shells next to him, and he comes up with a story about it, and he's like, "That's why we named the company after it." And Shell Oil. So that was a clever scene, but that's one in a
2-hour movie.
Yes. Well, I'm going to say pretty much the same thing. Yes, I chuckled and laughed bits and pieces here and there, but many of the jokes that weren't those fell flat. I was just waiting for this next scene to be over, and I think overall the dialogue itself, yes, again, perhaps sign of the times and when it was made and so forth, but nevertheless, it like you said, I was approaching cringing a lot. I'm like, if this keeps going on, this is going to get really lame. So I didn't particularly care for it overall.
Well, I'm gonna go with a 1 on this. And Steven?
Excuse me. I'm also gonna give it a 1.
I'm going to give it a 0.
0.
All right. And that leads us to style.
This is a this is a tough one because I did like a lot of the visuals in this movie, but it was also kind of bland at times. There was a lot of shots that were like interesting at the time, but a lot of shots that just seemed kind of worksman-like, you know, like, all right, let's get this shot and move on to the next scene or whatever. I did like the soundtrack, though. I thought the jazz music was great, like, going on throughout. And so, I don't know if anybody else has anything.
I don't know how to approach this.
Yes.
Because I've seen, like, cinematographically, I've seen movies of the contemporary movies of this, which did the same shots better. I did like the soundtrack, and I'm a sucker for jazz. And I actually enjoyed the scenes where Marilyn Monroe was singing. I thought she did a good job on those. But overall, like, the set pieces were bland and noticeably studio shot at times, especially like the Chicago scenes. And there wasn't anything distinct about this. Perhaps the most interesting like set piece was the train car when they're all like on the way to Florida and the dynamic of that, but it was a very passing moment. So I'm leaning towards a bad score, but perhaps someone can convince me otherwise.
Well, I agree that this is the most difficult question to apply to this film. It doesn't have much of a style, but there's nothing particularly wrong with it. And I think I may convince myself as I thought about it. I'm going to give it probably a good score. I like the black and white, and Marilyn's dress, if that counts as style, is going to all her dresses. That is to say, when she's singing. And and the jazz soundtrack definitely adds a lot to it. It was part of the plot, even.
She really drew the eye.
Yes.
So like so nothing, no, and it's another scene when they're on the yacht when he's like having a dinner with Marilyn on the yacht on the first night on the yacht. That was shot very cool, very noirish style as well. They even turn the lights down and they throw on the radio. So I like that scene. It was a good shot. So, overall, I think, it did a serviceable job, and yes, you could tell it was like on a studio, but that's, again...
Yes.
Well, it was the time
Yeah,
that
it's an artifact of that.
Again,
but,
when you're saying that, like, oh, yeah...
I know you're saying I forgive it for that.
Things that did the same, like, similar, better.
Sure, but I don't think they did anything necessarily particularly wrong. I wasn't, annoyed by the style in the sense I was annoyed by the protagonist, say. So, therefore, I think I'm leaning towards... It'll be maybe a soft one, but probably still one.
I'm going to tangent off in a little bit, because for me, the one thing about style that stood out was obviously the men in the women's clothes. And on the one hand, I loved it because it brought together the theme, because there's some parts where it's so obvious that they're just the way that they walk in the heels.
It's obvious the whole fucking movie, really.
Yeah. But... And then this is where it catches me, because I'm like, oh, I love that, because they're kind of making a joke of it. Like, how, come on, I mean, obviously, hello, they can't even walk in these heels. And, I mean, by the end, they mastered the heels, so very proud of that. But... On the other hand, and while I love because it adds to the theme, I'm just like, oh my god, you're surrounded by women. They're like all on the train car, touching each other and all over each other, and you don't realize it's a man. Like, for some reason, that just I don't buy. I can't get past it.
There were 10 women and one man dressed as a woman in a tight little single bunk
bed compartment of a train.
And none of the girls felt anything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And even before that, Marilyn Monroe is like cuddling with him and like caressing his body and touching, and like even that, like, even if you go to touch someone's feet or you look at their hands, like, to me there's a very difference between the way that the male hand looks. And
she does bring it up.
Yeah,
like, oh, you have broad shoulders for...
They sort of almost lampshaded, but of course, like, the characters still, like, if they noticed them, then the movie would be preemptively over, of course. So, like, it's suspension of disbelief for that. But it's still obvious,
right.
throughout.
And that's the problem. It's obvious, but as you said, you need it, or else the movie would end. So I'm so torn, because on the one hand, it does add to the themes, on the other hand, maybe as a woman, I'm just like, oh my god,
sure.
Come on, you can see the hands, the Adam's apples, So I don't know. Someone convince me on this.
Got no convincing left in me. I mean, if that's the only part that you had a problem with, I don't think there's much to convince. Honestly, I agree. Somebody should have realized it, but you gotta kind of let the movie be what it is, I guess.
Maybe I have a decisive factor for all of us, since we seem uncertain about this. It's supposed to be a comedy. Do you think it was effective as a comedy?
Overall, yes. Like maybe a begrudging one, but like I said, soft one. yeah, it held together as a comedy even when it tried to veer away from it. At least it snapped back quickly enough into comedy. Whether or not I thought it was funny comedy or not, at least they kept with it. So I'm giving it a 1 at the end of the day. Like I said, soft 1, but boom.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna give it a soft 1 as well.
I'm with you. A soft one, but
0.
All right.
all right. Well, I think we know how you're gonna land on this. But Ian, would you recommend this movie?
No. Moving on.
I probably would not either. I'd be like, I don't understand why this is a classic, and if it is, why it's so high up on the list. Like, maybe, again, because of the area it was made. However, I don't think it holds together. I think it could be bumped off the list or put way, way down.
I actually would. I just because I do like the themes, and if you're watching it for the time period, it's nice. The length of it is because it does come out in the era of competing against television. They need something to be long and a spectacle. So I understand that. And, boobies. There are a lot of Marilyn Monroe boob shots throughout the movie. So.
Even that doesn't save them. I'm sorry, Marilyn. Even your amazing body can't quite save this movie. So
And it was far from a spectacle. So,
I guess, yeah, that's true.
exactly.
I think that overall, as I said earlier, when I saw this previously years ago, I really enjoyed it. Not quite as much this time, but I still think it's a good movie and it holds together. Also, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look more into the history of it, but I'm sure it pioneered a lot of these jokes that
Perhaps
you saw for years and years afterwards.
and they're still not funny today.
Yeah. The same humor today is not going to make me laugh if the way it's done. Just not my kind of humor for the most part.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, that doesn't mean that no one likes
Sure.
it.
You can master-
Obviously, a lot of people who are film historians love it because it's like 22 on the AFI Top 100 list.
Yeah, well,
And Michael Bay is one of the best-selling directors of all time. That doesn't mean it's good.
yes.
Yeah, but Michael Bay is not one of the top 100 AFI movies.
Not yet. Just you wait.
Give it
Well, when
another
he
50.
becomes that, that's the day that we stop
The
using
day
this
that a
list.
Michael Bay movie bumps this movie out of the list, then we can say
Yeah.
we called it. But anyway.
So I'm giving it a 1.
Okay.
I'll go with a 1. Just go out, watch it. Can't kill you.
It literally can. I went in trying to like this movie, and well, no, not trying to like it, but I was open-minded.
Yeah. You gave it a
And
chance.
it lost me. Oh, then again, I don't like. I hated Tootsie as well, which I guess we're gonna have to review one of these days. I guess I have something against guys dressing up as girls. I don't find anything hilarious in it, or
It's a joke that gets old quickly.
yeah.
And when they're just
Mostly.
like, come on, you would totally realize
Sure.
at this point. All right, well, how do we land on our final
Okay,
scores?
well, we'll start from top to bottom here. Leah and Stevo both gave the movie a 7. Scott gave it a 5, and I gave it a 3. So overall, it scored a 5.5.
I think that's dead even. Exactly mediocre.
And very representative. It was like 2 liked it, 2 kind of, yeah.
Sure.
I think this might have been the worst movie the lowest rating I've given so far. So
Certainly not the lowest rating Monts is given now.
Maybe not.
All right, good night, everybody. It was a pleasure hanging out with you this evening.
Good night.
see you later.
See you on my yacht.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
Masterpiece Theatre.
Join us again next time, won't you?
Masterpiece Theatre.
Music and editing by Chris Morgan.
Masterpiece Theatre.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi.